Hey internet friends, as you can see, I am squatting. I am practicing my Slavic cultural integration. I have had many requests lately. Just a huge number of people ask me about net neutrality because it's been in the news and people are very interested in what I have to say on the matter and what side I think they should be on, because there's a lot of rhetoric being thrown around about the free and open internet. The enemies are telecommunications companies, and of course I went to jail basically for, the charges were false, but the alleged victim, victim in quotes here, was AT&T. So people figure that I'm all about the free and open internet, that AT&T, they might perceive AT&T as having thrown me in prison. The first thing is true. I am all about the free and open internet, and I am in fact one of the few engineers in the world that is actually at the forefront in fighting the essential problems of internet censorship. Of course, I have worked with a number of websites, the most censored publication in history, the Daily Stormer, a bunch of my friends. I've helped them, I've consulted with them. I do everything I can. I do everything I can to help them because there are powers that are huge in the world, international powers that want to shut this one website off for some sort of reason. I wonder what that reason is. But everybody's asking me about net neutrality, and do I support this concept because it's in the news again. I've written about this before. I'm going to link one of my earlier essays, a couple of them from years back, and I've consistently been in opposition to net neutrality, and I want to explain why. But first I want to talk about the hypocrisy of the parties trying to make this about the free internet and censorship and the right to publication. So Google is one of the biggest proponents of net neutrality, and Google is the single most key party in the international campaign of censorship. Of course, Google has seized dailystormer.com. They have seized a domain name of a website that they disagree with the political content with, and they refuse to give it back. So this is the single most party, most guilty of internet censorship in the whole world. And imagine that. They are the biggest supporter of net neutrality. Let's run through some of the other supporters. Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. So Facebook, I'm willing to bet that about 9/10 of my viewing audience has been suspended from Facebook, either for relatively innocuous comments or just being themselves. I was banned from Facebook permanently, not because of any post I made. It was just simply after Charlottesville, and I was banned for being me. I didn't have any political statements on my page. I was not engaged in any sort of propaganda on the Facebook platform. I was banned simply for my expressed political views off of the site. Not anything I've even said on the site. I was just banned for being me. But most of you have been, the recipient of the Zuck at one point or another because, you have any political opinion to the right of Marxism and you post it on your wall, and suddenly that you're banned and you're not allowed to use Facebook generally for 30 days, sometimes for 60 or 90, and then until they give you the permanent ban. So the next one, of course, is Twitter. Twitter is at the forefront of manipulating elections, literally. For, Ricky Vaughn was cited by a MIT study. He was one of the top 200 influencers of the last election. And this is done by MIT's Media Lab. It's a quantitative study. So this one guy on Twitter was a heavyweight in terms of shifting electoral opinion. One single guy, and of course they banned his account. So we know for a fact that Twitter is engaged specifically in politically motivated censorship. And in fact, it's the reason that they have all this funding from the Saudis and from prominent democratic sources. So for Twitter to pretend that they care about the free and open internet with this, net neutrality thing is ridiculous. Finally, with Reddit. Reddit, the front page right now is filled with like 10 different net neutrality things. One of them is like Final Fantasy, some MMO RPG. Final Fantasy, I think it's 14 or something. is going to be negatively affected by net neutrality, which is just ludicrous. It's just ludicrous. But net neutrality is about one thing and one thing only, because Reddit doesn't care about political speech. If they did, they'd unban Coontown. If Twitter cared, they'd unban me and Ricky Vaughn. If Facebook cared, they'd unban the entire white nationalist community. If Google cared, they'd give Daily Stormer its domain back, right? Like, these people don't care about free speech. They never did. Net neutrality is not about free speech. It's about something called peering via the Border Gateway Protocol. Now, peering is a direct connection between two what's called autonomous systems without using necessarily the internet, right? So when they say they care about the free and open internet, they're actually arguing for a kind of access that bypasses common internet routes. They want to force ISPs at given data centers to give them a special lane into their network architecture so that they don't have to use the same lane as everybody else on the internet. You're never going to have, like, I don't know a single site that's a political blog or anything, right? And that's what they're trying to say. Oh, your political content is going to be censored if ISPs are. No. Nobody in this community is announcing BGP routes, with the exception of, and historically Daily Stormer's done it on IPv6 for a very brief period, but nobody's generally doing BGP announcements. Like, that's not something that's happening, right? So the assertion that something that's about an argument that's about the routing layer has anything to do with free speech is just not true, right? It's about a bandwidth bill. That's all that it's about, is that these people want the ability to push unlimited amounts of streaming video at no cost to themselves on other people's networks. And that's all that it's about, is that they want Comcast to carry unlimited 4K streaming video, regardless of the cost that it will have to take for Comcast to upgrade their network to that capacity, right? And the thing about net neutrality and the way that they're arguing it is that it assumes the internet is a fungible commodity, right? That 1 megabit is 1 megabit everywhere. The internet is still very young and still being shaped. There's a huge requirement for a lot more innovation in regards to the internet. You can cite some of the low latency internet access providers that do specialty transit, like, the one that comes to mind was Windy Apple Technologies a few years ago. They made low latency radios entirely in FPGA and ASIC, and they did this to shave like a fraction of a millisecond off of their transit, because they wanted the lowest latency possible. And there would be not a lot of bandwidth. These are radios, these are microwaves, but as it turns out, there's a need for high frequency traders between Chicago and New York to have these very low latency internet connections. And when you run over the normal internet, right, it's like converted from copper to fiber, copper to fiber, copper to fiber a bunch of times. There's the refractory index of all the glass. Like, it adds up over time, and it turns out that shooting microwave radio straight from Chicago to New York, where you get a direct path, is takes less time in terms of milliseconds than, and you have very small messages in going these HFTs, these big funds, right? They're sending, they're asking about the price of a given stock or commodity. They don't need a lot of bandwidth. So point being is that there's a lot going on right now. People are doing new things with the internet to the limit of physics. To the limit of physics, people are doing new and unique things with the internet. And part of Title II with the FCC actually gives the FCC veto. It gives them veto over pricing schemes, which actually discourages competition. A huge part of the rhetoric as well, coming from Google and Facebook, is highly disingenuous, and that they're claiming that Comcast is this big monopoly, that net neutrality will ensure that they have to play by the rules. And what it's really going to do is make sure Comcast never has another competitor ever, because what's worse to market competition than a government authority getting arbitrary veto on new market entrants, right? It's like all the years ago, there was something called a competitive local exchange carrier. There still is. It was this thing that tried to give competition to the incumbent local exchange carriers, the big telecom companies. By and large, most of the CLECs were just bought up years later by the ILECs. It was just it was a thing, a stupid compromise that didn't actually increase competition, right? The thing that actually makes for a lack of competition is already regulation, is that Comcast will go to a municipality and they'll get an exclusive right in exchange for agreeing to lay fiber or copper in that municipality. They'll get an agreement over the span of years where nobody else gets to do the same thing. So the reason that Comcast has very little competition is already government regulations. And nobody's arguing. Google and Facebook and Twitter and Reddit and Netflix, they are not arguing for that monopoly to be dissolved, which is the primary obstacle to market choice in this arena. So they are not arguing for you to have more choice in internet service providers. They definitely aren't arguing for free speech on the internet. And if they were, there were a lot of things that they could do before net neutrality. They simply want to pay less money for bandwidth. And that, the idea that they're trying to push government legislation, right? Significant government legislation that will reduce your choice in the market for a very, very, very long time, that will destroy your ability as a consumer to select a new internet service provider. They're more than happy to do that. And the fact that they're doing that to pay nickels less on megabits per second is just fucking criminal. Like, fuck these people and fuck net neutrality. You should be opposed to it. It's a scam, it's a lie, it's not about the free and open internet. It never was and it never will be. If you want legislation about internet freedom, you need specific legislation about internet freedom, and it has to specifically enshrine political speech across all internet services. It has to have mandatory 7-figure penalties for the victims and time-bounded increased penalties for periods of non-compliance. You need that. It doesn't exist. If you want to lobby for the free speech on the internet, lobby for that, but do not lobby in the interest of the most censorious, scheming, oppressive parties in terms of free speech on the open internet. These people are criminals, they are liars, they are schemers, and they have no interest in the free and open internet. As a side note, not about net neutrality, I have a podcast, Race Ghost, Roast to Roast. If you search YouTube for Race Ghost episode 2, I'm not uploading them to YouTube. It's a little too hot for YouTube, but I'm sure that other people are doing that. Give it a listen. I did my last episode on Charles Manson. I feel it's a good episode. I feel it's a great product. It's also on weev.net, weev.net. I also want to say thank you to my Patreon and my Bitcoin donors. You guys are my primary source of income. You're huge drivers. I'm going to keep posting harder and harder because you guys are motivating me. And, now I make enough money with Patreon, a consistent amount of money that I can spend a lot of time every week making content. So thank you all. And I hope you enjoy the continued videos. I'm going to put out a podcast every week. I'm going to keep pushing out stuff that you enjoy. So thank you all, and hail victory.